or it's burned but in the streets. So yeah, it's pretty awful. I think that to me, this represents that in Mexico, we don't have a culture that educates about the consequences of this. What does it represent to you? Like, what does this lack of waste management in Mexico represents to you? What does it say about us?
Um, what does it say about you? Okay. Um, Most of the times when I think about all the production of waste and things that are being thrown away, I personally think that it's a lack of education and it's a lack of support from the system also. Like, for example, it's not enough education, for example, to show the impact. It's not enough, for example, um, from the entire system to have a support behind it, for example, because if you have a proper education, if you have a system that supports to be environmentally friendly, you won't have such huge effects, but you would become a country that is more ecological friendly. But what does it say about US people? I don't think that it's going to be what it says about US people, because you're so established in one culture and in one system that maybe you don't know it different. And so, for example, if you don't know different, then what are you going to do? But for example, I also think that, like, for example, it's very separate. Like, for example, there are people that don't care and that don't mind and that doesn't think about it and think, okay, I only have 10 more years to live, or 20 more years to live, or 30 years to live. Who cares about the generations that follow, for example? And and oftentimes you can see it there, like, for example, it's not that much education, or also not that many possibilities to do something different. Plus the system also doesn't support, like, for example, to think about green or to be environmentally friendly. But then, for example, I personally think that, for example, over the past like year or 2 years maybe, over here you could see that there are like beginning stages, like, for example, to be a little bit more cautious and to think about, like, for example, what am I doing? What am I doing with all the waste? Or what am I doing with all this production? Wait a second, I still live here on this earth. And so I want to be healthy. I want to be good. I want to support the environment, for example. So I think, like, over here, you're like in beginning stages of like making a change. And I personally hope that over the next years or so, that people are gathering more and more movements, for example, to establish a system that is so anchored in the educational system and is so anchored just in general in your system and in your culture, that there is no more question about like throwing something away or not, or what am I going to do? Am I going to produce waste or am I going to reduce waste? Like, for example, that it becomes an entire culture, and that more and more people could add to that.
Okay, teacher. So what do we know about Germany? Germany, as far as I know, at least, last year it was named the 10th most ecological country in the world, and in part it was because of their incredible system of waste management. A huge part of the trash there, it's usually sent to recycling centers, and also it is really ingrained in the culture just to be green, to walk everywhere, to use renewable sources of energy. I think that's fantastic, and it says a lot about the people of Germany. And I believe that it says that their culture is really, really conscious about the environment as a whole, because you are like educated to think beyond yourselves, to think of other people as well. And
Mhm.
but what does it do you think it says about yourself, teacher? Like,
Mm-hmm. Well, about myself, I mean, number one, I'm consider myself to be an ecological person because I have been growing up like that my entire life.
and you're
For
also
example,
vegan, right? You're vegan.
yes, Yes. So, yes, I am vegan for more than 30 years. For example, that's one part. But like, for example, like electricity saving, for example, we always have the phrase, turn off a light and you save some electricity, for example. As you say in Germany, like the solar powers, like secondary electricity sources, like all the reduction of recycling and like the entire system behind it. It is so well established in Germany that you grow up thinking green and you grow up thinking about the environment and like to think about others. And like, for example, what does it say about me? I mean, I consider myself to be an ecological person, and I'm always trying, like, for example, reduce waste. I'm not going to use plastic things, for example, or well, I don't eat meat, for for example, or I turn off electricity, or I instead of taking my car, I walk to the next like convenience store, for example, and like a lot of like little things that become something bigger. And I mean, in my mind, I'm so cautious about it because it's gonna be for my benefit if I do so, but then it's also going to be a benefit for everybody that is surrounding me, plus then everybody else on this earth. And I mean, if I make that's at least what I like to think, if I make a positive change, if I make a positive decision, if I'm standing for it, to think green and to make a stand and say, no, we're not going to throw these things away, they can be reused, for example, or no, we're not gonna buy plastic stuff, but we're gonna use the plates that we have in the kitchen. Like, for example, if I think, like, for example, like little things like those, I make the change. And so, and I like to pass that on, like, for example, to others, to be cautious about it, because at the end it's going to be a personal responsibility. If you like to see a change, like, one makes a stand, one makes a decision. And I like to think, like, if you impact somebody else with what you stand for, to think green, to reduce the waste, and to be cautious about your environment, I like to believe that this also continues on to others. And so, and that's basically what I'm considering, or what I think about what it says about me, not only to think about myself but also to think about others.
Okay, for our final question, we've already talked about Mexico and we've already talked about Germany.
Mhm.
But what about other countries? For example, the United States. It is the country that generates the most municipal waste per person, 2 kilograms a day. And again, just like in Mexico, most of it is not recycled, even though they do have better programs for the recycling of their waste. Actually, most of it ends not in landfills, but in the ocean. And what do you think that says about them as people?
One more time, I don't think that it says something about them as people. And I think you cannot do it, and you cannot like make it personal, like as them as people. But I think it's just in general, number one, educational issues. And number two, the entire system. Like, for example, as long as the system allows it, it's going to continue on. Or number two, if there is not sufficient education about it, you don't know better. So let's say, okay, I'm going to continue on with that behavior because I don't see a consequence because of that. Like, for example, in Germany, for example, it's like you depending on what you do, you see right away a consequence. Like, for example, in Germany, for example, the we have three trash bins, for example. One is for paper, one is for garden waste, and one is just general waste. And then there is one for glass, so it's for example. So in that case, for example, when the trash car comes, the trash car has, for example, a scanner. And so when the trash bin is being picked up, there is a scanner that goes through there. If the scanner notices waste, for example, in that bin that does not belong there, and then the waste people will put the trash down, you will get a ticket, and you're gonna have to go through your waste to separate it in order for them to take it, for example. So that's number one. So you're going to think twice what you're going to put in which bin, for example. So it's education, and it's like cause and effect. If I do this, then this is going to happen. Plus, for example, as you said, like, for example, if I am producing kilos and kilos and kilos and kilos of waste, for example, in Germany, for example, per person, you're allowed to have a certain amount of waste. If you surpass that waste limit, you will get a ticket. So it's like cause and effect. So you're thinking about it. Wait a second, I'm not allowed to produce that much waste. And that's what I said. Like, for example, I think it doesn't say something about them as people, but I just think it is, number one, a failure of the system, and number two, it's a lack of education. Because in the system, if it is well established and you see cause and effect, you think twice, or you're gonna reconsider your actions, for example. So I don't think that you can say it like, for example, them as people, but I think it's two matters. It's what does it say about the education, and what does it say about the system?
Okay, teacher. Thank you very much. This interview was super enlightening. And once again, thanks. I really loved to see the difference, the huge difference between our two countries, especially because it all relies in something so simple as education, and the betterment of, well, the betterment of the system isn't simple, but it's something that could be done, and we could all eventually get to that place where waste management is controlled and we don't have to worry about it as much.
Exactly. I completely agree with you. And that happens one person at a time, one decision at a time.
Okay, teacher, thank you very much. This is the
You're
end of the
welcome.
interview.